Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Hitting the Field podcast. It is your host, Jeremy Brener, and today we are doing something we've never done before in the history of Hitting the Field. We are predicting the NFL schedule. It's going to be released tonight. I can promise you this is not the real NFL schedule, so I'm sorry if you came to click on this expecting that, but this is what we believe to be the NFL schedule for 2020. Jeremy Brener here, and today, so over the past couple days with quarantine and all of that and post-grad life upon me, I have been a little bit I've been a little bit free with my time. So I had the time to craft and create the NFL schedule for 2020, and man, it was not easy, I must say. It was like a big giant puzzle that had so many different pieces. There are 256 games in the NFL schedule, and the fact that there's so many different combinations to get it right. So I created it, and Robert Husby and Chris Wolf here. How are you guys today?
Doing well.
Doing well as well.
Yeah, and they do not know what this schedule looks like. Only I do. So I get to present my masterpiece to these two today, and we get to talk about what we're going to see with this schedule. So first of all, boys, let's talk about just the schedule in general. What do you look forward to seeing in an NFL schedule release? Robert, I'll start with you.
Hopefully a lot of good matchups. There's a lot of good teams this year. Hopefully no delays or anything like that, obviously, given the current circumstances with coronavirus and all that. But no, definitely in terms of quality of games, I hope we see some good quality matchups. There's going to be a lot of rivalries, I think, just forming this year because of how good some of these divisions are going to be this coming year.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, so we know who's playing who. We know that Brady and Breeze twice a year is something that's going to happen this season. We know that Kansas City is going to play New Orleans also at some point. We know who's playing who. Seattle and San Francisco twice a year. But what's the important in knowing when teams play?
Yeah, I like to see. That's like the main thing I like to look for. I like to look when they schedule these games because you can kind of predict on how the teams are gonna play out, like how good they're gonna be. So you can plan accordingly to see. Oh, this week this could be a big storyline game to tell. This could be make or break the division or the conference since there's only one number one. There's only one first round bye this year. So you can schedule those games accordingly. Like this could be a game where this team can take a big, like let's say the Saints can take a big lead for number one seed to get that first round bye. Oh, but the Tampa's right behind them. If they win this game, that makes it really interesting. Sort of like maybe the latter part of the season.
Mm-hmm. So what I've done here is I've used my handy dandy Google sheet here. I have sheets for the master schedule, the national TV schedule, and every week so far in the schedule. That is not something that you guys are supposed to see. But anyway, pretend like you didn't see that. So, but anyway, we're going to start with week number 1. So here's the rule for every team. Obviously, you get one bye. No team has three. No team has no team has more than 3 road games or 3 home games in a row. So there are a lot of 3-game homestands and 3-game road trips, but no team has 4-game homestands or 4-game road trips. Every team plays each other. Every division team obviously plays each other twice, one at home, one on the road, and then so on and so forth. They play the same team at the same place in their division twice. 2 in the same conference, and then obviously every AFC conference plays one NFC conference every year. So everything is accurate to what the games are all accurate. It's just a matter of when we're going to see them. So week 1, the opening game, the game that kicks off the 101st NFL season, the Kansas City Chiefs are usually in I guess tradition speaking. The NFL usually puts the defending champions on at home for week 1. However, this tradition isn't always something that is followed, given that last year the Packers went to the Bears to open the season, and neither found themselves anywhere close to the Super Bowl, where the Patriots beat the Rams. I believe that was the last. Yes, that was the last Super Bowl before this one. But this year, I've also decided to break a little bit of tradition because I looked at the Kansas City home opponents and I wasn't too impressed, guys. But I did look at the Kansas City road opponents, and there was one game that stood out that had to be the opening game. And of course, the Kansas City Chiefs go to Tampa Bay to meet Tom Brady and the Buccaneers in his first game, not in a Patriots uniform. So that's the opening game, guys. Kansas City, Tampa Bay. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. That's a great matchup to start the season. You get, obviously the defending champs. That's a tough game for them because they're away. They're not going to be at Arrowhead, so that's a really tough matchup. And obviously for Tampa, it's great because they're looking at, they should be looking at a full Raymond. Well, actually, there's not going to be any crowds this year probably, so that shouldn't be a factor. But I think that's great for Tampa because they get a chance to open at home. Brady gets to, make his debut in Tampa. I think that's actually a really good matchup. Really tough for Kansas City to kick off the season.
Yeah, Chris, what you thinking?
I actually really like this matchup. I mean, every Brady Mahomes matchup I've seen, and like even the last couple of years, they've been very good. They've been down to the wire type games, and this wouldn't be any different. I mean, Brady gets to open. He gets to have his Tampa debut at home. With all those weapons. I mean, you know how people love offense. This would be an offensive shootout, considering both defenses, both secondaries specifically, aren't really the best. So I would look for both quarterbacks to take advantage of the suspect secondaries. That would be a great shootout to start the NFL season.
Yeah, and I mean, last year we had a 10-3 shootout in the first game. So I think the NFL definitely wants some offense in their first game, definitely wants some fireworks. And I feel like they do want Kansas City to open it at home to begin the season, but this is a matchup you simply can't ignore, and this would be a great way to start the season. So let's move on to the early matchups for the Sunday at 1 p.m. You have the Chargers at Buffalo, the Steelers heading to Jacksonville, the Texans heading to Detroit to face the Lions, Cincinnati opening Joe Burrow's career on the road at Cleveland, the Jets going to Miami to face the Dolphins, the Washington heading to Philly to face the Eagles in a divisional matchup, the Giants heading to the East Coast to face the Niners heading to the East Coast to face the Giants, the Atlanta Falcons heading to Carolina in a divisional matchup, and Chicago opening the season in the AFC against Tennessee. What matchup here, guys, stands out to you the most? Robert, we'll start with you.
Honestly, it's between Cincinnati and Cleveland just because of the Battle of Ohio, and obviously, Baker Mayfield should have a better team this year to really put Cleveland in good chance for a playoff spot. And then obviously that's Joe Burrow's debut on the road as well. So that's a really interesting matchup. But also I think, the Jets in Miami, just because they had so many changes this offseason that really with the Patriots kind of regressing and losing a lot of players, you could see, one of these two teams take that second seed in the division. And, with the expanded playoffs, obviously this is week 1, but these teams should be completely revamped from last year and should be much better teams. So that's an interesting matchup as well. And obviously that's a divisional rivalry, a huge rivalry in the AFC East, Miami and New York.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this was more about just, the 1 p.m. time slots, I feel like are just reserved for the games that kind of just, the least amount of attention. But I mean, out of these games, the one that excites me the most, obviously, is the Houston-Detroit game. I'd like to see Houston opening up a game on the road. Oh, that's winnable I think it's very hard to win at week 1, regardless of what team you are, whether you're home or away, whether you're the defending champions or whether you're the cellar dwellers that pick number 1. But Houston-Detroit would be a favorable first matchup for the Texans. So I would hope that would be the first matchup. Obviously, this is obviously the Hitting the Field podcast. So if you are listening to this, that is totally fine. But if you want a more enhanced viewing experience, probably viewing this on YouTube would make more sense because we have a visual representation of the schedule as well on my Google Sheet. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Had to throw that in there. But let's move on to the late matchups here. So Chris, your Seattle Seahawks open at home against the New England Patriots. And we also get the Vegas Raiders. Their first game is the Vegas Raiders. They have to open on the road against the Denver Broncos. And the main matchup, the national TV game for the week, Dallas Cowboys heading to Baltimore to face the Ravens. How difficult would that be for Dallas to open the season at Baltimore, Chris?
I think that's a very difficult game, considering the fact that you've had some contract disputes with Dak Prescott. Will he actually play in the preseason, or will he go to training camp? Will he sit out? So you have that issue, along with maybe some more. You got new pieces on the team. I mean, you brought back a lot. You brought back some of the same, but you have a new center. You have a new center because Travis Frederick retired. I mean, CeeDee Lamb is gonna have to he's gonna have to fit in with that system. I mean, potentially, and you're going up against one of the best offenses last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could probably have a Lamar Jackson that is going to come out stronger than last year. You have a very good running. You have the best running attack by far in the league. Great offensive line, though Marshall Yanda retired, that's a big loss. But I mean, still great offensive line. Improved defense. So that's a very tough way to go on the road.
Yeah. I mean, I would see the thing about Baltimore is they were the best offense last year, but they still have something to prove because they didn't win a playoff game. So I think to me that's incredibly dangerous. But now we go to Sunday night. Minnesota going back to New Orleans to face the Saints. Obviously, this is where New Orleans season ended last year, so a big motivation game for them, especially at the very beginning of the season. Robert, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a chance for New Orleans to sort of get some of that revenge. Obviously embarrassed at home last year in the playoffs. Minnesota eliminates them. So New Orleans definitely is going to have a chip on their shoulder, I'm sure, going into their first game. This is going to be really interesting because, again, talking about the possibility of not having fans, I mean, the Superdome is known for having that scary just crowd atmosphere. And so with Minnesota going away, if there's no fans in attendance, I mean, that's actually a huge loss for New Orleans.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Now we move on to the Monday night games. It's obviously a doubleheader for the first week. You get Green Bay heading to the Colts in Phillip Rivers' debut as a member of the Colts. That's the first game. And then, Robert, your LA Rams open up SoFi Stadium against the Arizona Cardinals with DeAndre Hopkins in his first game as an Arizona Cardinal. Chris, what game here intrigues you more, the Packers Colts or Cardinals Rams?
I'm going to go with the late game. I'm going to go with the Cardinals and the Rams because I'm very excited to see what this new offense for the Arizona Cardinals is going to look like with DeAndre Hopkins there with that team. You have Kyler Murray with a year under his belt. Larry Fitzgerald's there. You got Christian Kirk. You got Kenyon Drake. It's such a great offense. And that defense looks improved with Isaiah Simmons after you drafted him. Mm-hmm. But I am intrigued to see how Jared Goff looks without Todd Gurley. Mm-hmm. You having a rookie running back in Cam Akers now. And so this is going to be a big this game and this whole season. It's going to be a big year for Jared Goff to prove that he is a franchise quarterback and he wasn't just getting maybe carried by Todd Gurley. Potentially. Yeah. That's what I want to see.
Robert, do you like this matchup to open up for your Rams?
Oh yeah, I mean it's that division is just going to be crazy this year, just because of how improved every team is and how good they are. So I mean this game can go either way. The Rams got a lot to prove. Goff's got a lot to prove. You're at home, opening a new stadium. They got to really show out against a stacked team that really improved this offseason. So that's a really great matchup to start the season.
So now we move on to week 2. Let's see if this does it right. Okay, there we go. Yes. So this is where Cincinnati gets their primetime game. Joe Burrow in his first primetime game. It's a short week, but they go to Baltimore to face the Ravens. Lamar Jackson versus Joe Burrow, the first of their battles. Chris, would you watch this even though it's Cincinnati?
I would probably watch it. I would probably watch this game. I mean, I like the offense. I think this should be a good
blowout, though.
It could be a blowout, but I also believe that I think it'd be entertaining. I think Cincinnati would keep it closer than expected because I think this offense for the Cincinnati Bengals is going to be very good. I think they can keep up for a little bit, but in the end, I feel like the Ravens would just play ball control and in the second half and just keep the ball away from the Bengals. That's how they would win.
Yeah. I figure, I think Cincinnati is going to get a very early primetime game because when you have to put when you have to put every team on primetime at least once, you want to put Cincinnati, because I feel like Cincinnati, later in the season, more opportunity for them to tank, to not be as good. There's a lot more buzz surrounding them at the beginning of the season. So I think what you're going to see in this schedule, what I try to do is I try to put as many of the bottom feeder teams on national TV earlier, just so there would be more excitement on the team. And there is a lot of excitement with the Bengals, with Joe Burrow. Excuse me. Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right, so let's move on to the opening games for Sunday. We get the Broncos at the Jets, the Bills at the Patriots, the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Titans, Cleveland at Dallas, the Rams heading to Miami to face the Dolphins, the Giants heading to Chicago to face the Bears, Detroit heading to Green Bay to face the Packers, Minnesota heading to Indianapolis to face the Colts, Atlanta heading to Tampa to face the Buccaneers, and Carolina heading to the nation's capital. So, guys, Robert, I'll go quickly here. What matchup here intrigues you the most? I mean, it's the Robert Husby Bowl with the Rams and
It definitely is, but I'm gonna go Buffalo, New England on that, just for matchup because of obviously rivalries and stuff like that, but also because Buffalo could be taking that division this year.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is going to be a really New England's had Buffalo's number for quite a few years, and it's going to be interesting to see if Buffalo can sort of start turning fate around and saying, well, you don't got Brady anymore, you don't got Gronkowski, your team's significantly weaker. Let's see if Buffalo can finally push forward and take that first seed in the AFC East. So that's an interesting matchup for me.
It's an early test for Buffalo and for New England. I also think this Minnesota-Indy matchup looks really good. I tried to slot this in a primetime spot somewhere. I couldn't find the room for it because there are so many good there are so many games this year worthy of primetime. Pittsburgh, Tennessee is also one that you could have seen in a later time. But ultimately, they get the 1:00 spot. Maybe they get Jim Nantz calling that game. But let's move on to the late games here. Chris, your Seattle Seahawks head to Arizona to face the Cardinals. Jacksonville heads to the Chargers in their debut at SoFi Stadium. And the main game this week, Philadelphia heads to San Francisco to face the 49ers in a matchup of two divisional winners from a year ago. Chris, Philly, San Francisco. What do you think about that one?
That one's gonna be a really tough test for the Eagles. It's gonna be an early season test for them because it's gonna test their secondary a little bit and their new defense because their defense was opportunistic, at least up front, but in the back end it was just not that great. But now you obviously you got Darius Slay. You added Kayvon Wallace in the draft. So I think that's going to be a good test for the secondary and also for Carson Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
A good early test against one of the best defenses in the league. And also, I just can't wait to see that Eagles both front sevens, because both front sevens are very good. Like that San Francisco front seven, it's the same. I mean, you traded DeForest Buckner, you drafted Kinlaw. I mean, that's a pretty good replacement right there for him. And obviously, the Eagles front seven has been pretty good for a last couple of years. That's like the best part of that defense. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for both front sevens.
Yeah. Then we move on to Sunday night. This was the game that I thought could have been the opening game because it is Kansas City at home. I figured giving them a home game week 2 was absolutely necessary, especially one that's on prime time. And they get the Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson, this is where the Texan season ended in January, so a big matchup for them. This is probably Kansas City's toughest opponent that will come to Arrowhead this year. Kansas City could very well go 8-0 at Arrowhead this season just because they are simply better than every team that is coming into the building. They're better than probably every team in the league, if you will. But that's where I slotted them, Houston, Kansas City. Could you see this, though, as the opening game, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that.
Would you be okay with that? Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I like, even though Houston, made a lot of changes with Hopkins and stuff like that leaving, I thought they made some decent moves and, they're going to look a little bit different next season. I think they can still be a competitive team. I think that division's still up for grabs, even with the Titans, improving. But no, I like this matchup. I think, it's a great quarterback duel. You got Deshaun Watson versus Patrick Mahomes. I think that's a fantastic matchup at quarterback. And, it's a good game for Kansas City to sort of, recoup after a really tough road game if they really do open up against Tampa Bay on the road. So, yeah, I think that's a really nice matchup.
Yeah. I mean, I figure if they honor the tradition of putting the defending champions at home week 1, this would be the game. It's not personally what I would choose, but I gave them the next best thing, which is week 2 of Sunday Night Football. But then we get to Monday Night Football, and again, we have another stadium opening in Monday Night Football with the Saints going to the Raiders to open Allegiant Stadium. So yeah, that's where we're at for week 2. But let's move on now to week 3. We have the Giants heading to the nation's capital to face Washington. They needed a primetime game, especially Washington. So this is where they get. But I mean, also it's Chase Young against possibly the team that he could have gone to in New York. I remember this game last year when they played at the FedEx Field, and it was the Giants won this game, and it basically determined that Washington would get ahead of them in the draft, and they would be able to get Chase Young. But this happens to be a Thursday night football game this season. Early in the season in week 3, it's Chase Young against Saquon Barkley, their first test against one another. So I'm excited for this one. I think that this is a good early season Thursday night game. But let's move to the early games here for week 3. Tennessee heads to Cincinnati to face the Bengals. Baltimore heads to Indianapolis to face the Colts. Miami heads to Buffalo to face the Bills. Cleveland heads to Jacksonville to face the Jaguars. Las Vegas heads to New England to face the Patriots. Chargers travel to New Orleans to face the Saints. Denver heads to Atlanta to face the Falcons. Chicago heads up north to Minnesota to take on their divisional rival, the Vikings. Tampa heads to Detroit to take on all of his old teammates. And Carolina heads to Kansas City. Chris, what matchup intrigues you the most here?
It's pretty tough because there's a few pretty good matchups in this 1:00 slate.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to choose potentially Carolina and Kansas City, but I'm gonna lean toward Ravens Colts. I'm very intrigued with that matchup because the Colts they're very underrated. The Colts are very underrated. Like that roster they have is really good. They have a good veteran quarterback, and it'll be the first road game for Lamar Jackson, and it'll be a good test, good early test for Lamar Jackson, because I believe this would be the game where maybe you can see you might ask him to throw the ball more, because and also it might be the first time the Ravens go up against an offensive line that might be better than theirs or just as good as theirs, because the Colts have a very good offensive line and they can run the football very well. You have a quarterback that can get the ball to the receivers, the new receivers that they have now. Their defense is opportunistic. It's very good. So that's the one I would look for out of these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's move on to the late games here. So San Francisco heads out west to Arizona. The Jets head out west to LA, New York, LA. And then the main game, the game of the week, Green Bay at Houston. It's Houston's home opener. It's also Aaron Rodgers versus Deshaun Watson. Robert, what game? Like what intrigues you the most about Green Bay, Houston?
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, I think it's the quarterback matchup. I mean, Rodgers is going to have a big chip on his shoulder. I think that's going to be a theme this year with a lot of teams. But, Aaron Rodgers is probably not thrilled that they didn't give him any more offensive help. They drafted Jordan Love in the first round. So I'm sure he wants to really, really prove, like, this is my team. It's still my team, and it's going to be my team until I retire. Houston, obviously, like I said before, a lot of changes. It's going to be interesting to see what they do this year. And I think that's a really nice matchup. I mean, both of these teams are kind of those bubble teams where you can see them kind of making the playoffs, and are they going to make a significant run? There's a lot of questions at quarterback. Obviously, there's all the rumors with Deshaun Watson. I don't buy into any of them. I think he's staying. But, there's that. There's the Aaron Rodgers thing. So a lot of question marks around these teams. But, definitely two good teams, I think, that are going to play each other very well.
Mm-hmm. So now we move to Sunday Night Football for Week 3. It is your Seattle Seahawks, Chris, hosting the Dallas Cowboys in their first primetime game of the season. What do you think about this one?
I really like this matchup. It's two similar style teams. They both have good quarterbacks. They both have really good quarterbacks that are mobile, but they always like to set it up with the run. They both are heavy play action teams when they throw it. They both run the ball more than they pass. I think this is a great matchup. The question is, the question is, will Dak is Dak gonna hold out? I don't think he is. So, and the defenses, it'll be a test for, obviously, I think, for Russ as well against that defense, because that secondary, that defense got a lot better in Dallas. They got better secondary. And Seattle was uncharacteristically bad at home. They only were 4-4 last year. So that is something to watch too. Did they lose their home mojo? Though they may not be crowd, so that may not be a factor. But still, they played on their home field and they just didn't win games, which just might even be worse, because even with that crowd, they still were 500 at home. So that's something to watch for.
Yeah, and then we move on to the Monday night game this week. It's the Battle of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia at Pittsburgh for Week 3. Robert, what does this game bring as a Monday night game?
Well, it's obviously a rivalry. It's a big rivalry, but also, it's Philadelphia who have improved their secondary and their defense and stuff like that, and obviously Carson Wentz has a lot to prove this year. Coming off of, his history of injuries. And it's also a lot for Pittsburgh to prove. Pittsburgh wasn't very good last year. Obviously lost Ben Roethlisberger for a good majority of the season last year. He'll likely be back and in full form at this point in the season. And, I think Pittsburgh's got a lot to prove. They should be a lot better. They got a nice defense. And, just having a veteran quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger back gives them infinite more chances to pull out a win against, one of their big in-state rivals. So, I think that's a nice matchup. I think anytime you put one of these rivalry games on a Monday night, there's interest, obviously, because there is that sort of, hometown feud. So I think, any way you slice it, it's a good matchup.
Yeah, it's a rivalry game, and it's a rivalry game that doesn't happen very often because they are in opposite conferences.
Yeah.
So it only adds to the specialness of the occasion. So now we go to week 4. This is where the buys begin. So, but we start off with Buffalo heading to Vegas to face the Raiders. Interesting Thursday night football game here. Chris, you like this one?
Very interesting game. Like, just two teams going in completely different directions too. Buffalo is ascending while you see the Raiders kind of like they don't know who they are because they don't know if Derek Carr is their quarterback. They aren't. It's just like they're kind of like a team that they're kind of like an unknown team against a team on the uprise. So it will be an interesting matchup. I like the young talents. I mean, you're going to see maybe Tre'Davious White going up against Henry Ruggs. I think that would be a good test for the young wide receiver.
Mm-hmm. And so now I'll read off the buys for the week. So this is where the bye weeks begin. So the teams with bye weeks this week are Baltimore, I believe, Carolina, the New York Jets, and Seattle has a bye this week. Chris, how important is the placement of the bye week, and how would you feel about Seattle having the earliest possible bye week?
I in my when I look at this, I think having bye weeks in the middle of the season, I think favors the most because usually by week 4, you're not dealing with people that are injured or banged up. It's just like you're still kind of fresh, and the early buys I think kind of will hurt teams, especially teams that have playoff and Super Bowl aspirations, because some of those teams will need the later in the year bye week to get healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Robert, do you think there should be bye weeks this early in the season?
I mean, you have to put them at some point, you know. I mean, you can't have everybody late in the season having bye weeks. But no, I agree with Chris. I mean, the problem with having bye weeks this early, at least for these teams that do have them this early, is that a lot of these teams are still going to be fresh. There's not going to be a lot of mileage on the legs and all that, and there's not going to be a lot of hopefully not going to be a lot of significant injuries that keep people out for the rest of the season. So you don't really need bye weeks this early, but I mean, you have to put them somewhere. And unfortunately, some of those teams are going to get put earlier. Sometimes it'll benefit them because, maybe they are dealing with some minor injuries where they'll come back late in the season when they do need them, especially for competitive teams like Seattle and Baltimore. If they're missing somebody early on, it gives them a chance to rest those guys and have them later in the season. But yeah, I mean, it kind of goes both ways. It's a positive and a negative, and it just really depends on the situation surrounding a particular team. There's not really one size fits all with these bye weeks.
Right. Yeah. So let's move on to the early games here. The 1:00 starts. Houston heading to Tennessee to face the Titans in a divisional matchup. Cleveland heading to Pittsburgh, another divisional matchup there. Jacksonville heading to Cincinnati to face the Bengals. The Chargers heading to Tampa to face Tom Brady and the Bucks. Arizona heading out east to New York to face the Giants. Dallas, Philadelphia. That was another game I tried to get on in a national spot. Could not do that. But we have Atlanta and Kansas City and New Orleans at Detroit. So again, guys, what game intrigues you the most, Chris?
I'm probably gonna have to go with that Dallas Philly matchup. That's a great early season rivalry matchup. I mean, even though it's early, this stuff still sets the tone for the season. Like it will give somebody an advance, like a game up and on one another. Somebody have a game on each other early in the season, and especially with Philly being at home where they were very good, and you have a team like Dallas that struggles on the road and struggles against good competition. I mean, think about it. Philly was the only team they beat last year that actually made the playoffs. Like they didn't beat anyone really last year.
Right.
So it's a big test for them as well. Are they gonna? It's another big test. Like they have early test. Let's get some early tests and early in the season. Have they improved?
Yeah. This comes off of San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and then Dallas. So a tough start to the season for Philadelphia and company. But now we move to the late games. We get New England at the Rams in a rematch of that Super Bowl from 2 years ago. Though the New England Patriots look very different, and so do the Rams. Then you have Miami at Denver, and then Green Bay at Minnesota in an NFC North matchup. So, yeah, that Green Bay Minnesota game could really tip the balance of power in the NFC North. And this early in the season, it's incredibly important. So I would be intrigued to see that game as well. Green Bay Minnesota would be the late game for Week 4. Then we get to Sunday Night Football. The Indianapolis Colts head to Chicago to face the Bears in Indianapolis in Chicago's first primetime matchup of the season. And then we get to the Monday night game, Washington, San Francisco. Not huge games for Week 4 here. This was probably the week that I think felt the most underwhelming. I mean, I could have thrown Dallas into the late slots. I considered it, but I also thought that Chicago needs some love. They need some love, and for mostly it was now that I look back on it, it's probably because Dallas has a lot of primetime games later in the season, and I needed to limit them. I believe overall Dallas has, I think, 5 games or 4 games on national TV. They have 4 games on national TV. So I mean, I could have thrown a 5th one. Philly has 3. So maybe looking back on it, I probably should have moved them onto one of these games. But nonetheless, I've decided what I've decided, and I'm going to stick by it. But now let's move on to Week 5. The Thursday night game for Week 5 is New York Jets at Seattle. So this is what I was talking about when it came to buys. So this is one thing that I'd like to change, that I'd like to see changed with the NFL schedule. So we talk about how the NFL schedule has teams that play short weeks on Thursday. Sunday to Thursday is not enough time to transition into the next game. Injuries are very likely to happen. They're more likely to happen on Thursday nights than they are on Sundays. And so the Jets and Seattle are 2 teams that have not played. This is October 8th. They have not played in a week and a half. They have not played since Week 3. So one of the propositions that I have with the schedule is to put 2 teams with a bye the previous week on Thursday Night Football the next week. Less Thursday night injuries. Obviously, you can't really account for that during weeks 2 through 4 and then when the bye weeks end. But at least here you have a way to reduce that. And I think the players would appreciate that. Chris, this is Seattle here. I'll give you the floor here. So what do you think the benefit is of having this kind of bye week system with Thursday Night Football?
I actually really I personally like it because it does reduce the injuries or not having to play off of just 4 days of rest potentially. You just get 4 days and then you play again. You get that extra week before you play a short week, so you get that extra 7 days off, and I think that would decrease the injury risk, and it also would fill the Thursday night slots a lot. I think to be a lot more consistent instead of just because I know how people really just dislike 4 days, and then it's like you play 2 games in 4 days or 4 or 5 days. You play 2 games. That's like very unsafe. And I think this would be a very good way to reduce all the bad injuries, especially, and even like just wearing people out too. That's gonna wear people out. Like 4 or 5 days, you play 2 full football games in 4 or 5 days. That's gonna wear somebody out.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it still is part of the schedule. If you want Thursday Night Football, it's inevitable that you're going to have teams that play on Sunday that also play on Thursday. But I think that this And I think they don't have this rule in place simply from a competition perspective, where we're going to make it fair for everybody because some teams have to suffer, we all have to suffer. So I think that's why it's put in place. But I feel like this is something I don't know if the NFL's thought about this in their scheduling. I'm sure they have. But this is something that I thought was an idea that I would like to propose into it. So I made it part of my schedule. Don't think we're going to see that with this schedule release coming up, but we'll see. But the teams with byes this week are Cleveland, Minnesota, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. So you're not going to see those teams with games this week. But you will see teams with games here in the 1 o'clock hour. Jacksonville heading to Green Bay to face the Packers. Indy to Detroit to face the Lions. Baltimore heading to New England to face the Patriots. That's an interesting game for a 1 o'clock game. I mean, no Tom Brady, but still. Rams heading to Washington. Chicago heading to Atlanta. And Cincinnati, Houston. So that's your opening matchup. A very thin opening slate for Sunday. But the thing is, the afternoon slate is very large, 5 games on its own, because we have a lot of West Coast games, and including the main game of the week, the Giants at Dallas. So we also have Tennessee at Denver, Kansas City at Las Vegas, Carolina at the Chargers, and you have Miami at San Francisco. So yeah, that's where you're at. You have 3 Fox games, 3 CBS games. But guys, what do we think about this slate of games right here? Let's go with Robert. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean they're definitely interesting. I think Denver Tennessee is an interesting matchup. Obviously, we talk about Tennessee being in contention for first in the AFC South. Denver should be a much improved team after a really good draft I thought they had. And then, looking at the rest of this, I think Giants Dallas is a decent matchup as well. Obviously, an in division rivalry. I don't know how good the Giants are going to be this year. I don't think they're going to be that much improved. But just seeing one of those divisional matchups where the Giants can play spoiler to a team like Dallas when they have to, especially since Dallas has already faced Philadelphia at this point in the schedule. If they lose that Philadelphia game, the Giants can really make play some spoiler here early in the season. So I think, that's an interesting matchup as well.
Yeah. So let's move on to the Sunday night game here. This is where we get Brady Breeze Part 1, Sunday Night Football Week 5, Tampa Bay at New Orleans. Chris, we get the fact that we get this once a year is a treat. The fact that we get this twice a year, it's like Christmas. And it comes on October 11th this year. What do you think about Tampa, New Orleans? And is there really a competition here, or is there one team that stands above the other?
I think as of right now, I would put I think the Saints should be slightly above Tampa just because I think they have a more established team as a whole. They are better at running back than the Bucks. They're better in the secondary than the Bucks. So I think right now, like, the Saints are just a slightly better team, though Tampa obviously can surprise. They can improve in the secondary a lot. Ronald Jones got a really good year, but nonetheless, this is just going to be an amazing matchup. Both of them will be amazing matchups, and it's just we are privileged. We have the privilege of watching this. Like, we don't deserve it, but we get it though.
Yeah, and there you go. That and obviously the second matchup comes later in the year, but we get the Monday night game here. I really like Arizona, so I put them on Monday Night Football 2 times in 5 weeks, and this time they get Buffalo, a playoff team from a year ago. So yeah, I like the aesthetic of this matchup. Buffalo on a Monday night game, heading on the road late to the West Coast. It's not something we usually see, but I think this game is worthy of a primetime game, worthy of a Monday night game. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this game has to offer. But then we move on to week 6, and it is a return to the scene of the crime. Pittsburgh at Cleveland. Obviously, this game was a Thursday night game a year ago, and it was brought all the dramatics, the Myles Garrett versus Mason Rudolph. Excuse me. Wow.
Bless you.
These allergies. I'm going to go off camera for a little bit. But, yeah, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. You guys talk about it while I blow my nose.
No, yeah, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. I mean, like you said, Jeremy, I think the whole feud that came out of last year with the Rudolph and Myles Garrett situation with the helmets flying everywhere. I mean, there's going to be a lot of nastiness between these two teams, and I'd be very surprised if we don't see some more, because those guys are still on the team. Obviously, Rudolph likely won't be starting because Roethlisberger will be back, but Myles Garrett is still there. There's a lot of guys on the Pittsburgh defense that still remember very well what happened last year, and these are two teams that are going to should be pretty good. So I mean, there's a lot, even skill wise and bad blood wise. I think there's just makes this a really interesting Thursday night game going back since last year.
And Chris, what do you feel about this matchup happening again on a Thursday night?
I mean, I don't mind it. I don't mind it happening. I mean, this rivalry, it's a really good game. I mean, Cleveland has a lot to prove. Let's just say Cleveland has a lot to prove this season, and because they had I think their expectations last year were a little bit overblown, but nonetheless, that team should have won more than 7 games, and so these are the games they need to win. They can't be playing in close games or maybe even potentially losing to these average teams. These are the games they need to win, especially on national television.
Yeah, and now we move on to the buys for this week. Let me put this in aerial. So we have Buffalo, Dallas, Houston, and Indianapolis. All right. So those are your buys for this week. Our early games here, we have Kansas City at Miami. This was originally going to be the London game, but with London games not happening this year, it takes place in Miami. Jacksonville heading to Baltimore to face the Ravens. Cincinnati heading to the nation's capital to face Washington. Tennessee at Green Bay. That's an exciting game for the first slate of games. New Orleans heading to Carolina to face the Panthers. Minnesota heading to Chicago to face the Bears for the second time this season. Detroit at Atlanta. And Arizona at the Jets. Then we move on to the late games here. The Giants head to LA to face the Rams. That's funny. The Rams get to face both New York teams this year. Very, very interesting. Then Tampa heads to Vegas to face the Raiders in Brady's first excursion, likely last excursion, although actually, yeah, it definitely is his last excursion to Vegas. If he does make another excursion to Vegas, it'll either be for a Super Bowl or when he's 50 years old. And that's even if he's still playing for the Bucs. I don't know if that's going to happen. But then we also have Seattle heading to Philly. That's where the Eagles season ended last year. Chris, this is the main game of the week for Week 6. So, what do you think about Seattle Philly?
I think the Philly's gonna have some revenge on their minds, because obviously when you get taken out by the same team in the playoffs a year ago, and they come to your house for a potential late game, I mean, they're gonna want revenge, because especially for Jadeveon Clowney, if he's still in Seattle, especially if he's still in Seattle, because he took out their quarterback Carson Wentz, because there are people that think that Carson Wentz doesn't get hurt. Maybe they beat Seattle in the wild card round. So they're going to want to win that game. They're going to be motivated to win that game.
Yep.
Very
grounds right here, Week 6 at the link. So then we move to Sunday Night Football here. San Francisco at New England. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's Jimmy Garoppolo's first game against the Patriots in New England. So that's the intrigue with this matchup, why it appears on a Sunday night. And then the Monday night game this week, we have the Chargers at Denver. Very classic divisional rivalry, late game on a Monday night in the middle of October. It just feels right. And that's why I placed it here. So then we get to week 7 here. The Colts at the Texans. I feel like this has been a Thursday night game for several years now, and it appears on Thursday Night Football once again. So there you have it. There is your Thursday night game for the week. Do you think, guys, that Indianapolis and Houston, this game could be for the AFC South crown possibly? Chris, we'll start with you.
I believe yes, because I think Tennessee was just really good last year, but I think these two teams are still the tops of the two top dogs in the AFC South, and I believe, and in the end, it'll be between these two teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the buys this week are the LA Chargers and Miami. Those are your buys. That's it. Only 2. Only need 2 for this week. But then we get to our early games here. Las Vegas heads to Carolina to face the Panthers. The Rams head to Buffalo to face the Bills. Baltimore heads to Cleveland to face the Browns. Chicago heads to Jacksonville to face the Jaguars. San Francisco heads to New York for the second time this season, but to face the Jets. Dallas heads to Cincinnati to face the Bengals. Washington heads to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers. And Tampa, in a divisional rivalry, faces the Atlanta Falcons. Then we move on to the late games here. New Orleans at Denver, Detroit at Arizona, Giants at Seattle, and New England at Kansas City. What game here, guys, intrigues you the most? Robert, I'll go to you first.
I'm just gonna have to say Kansas City, New England, just because of the matchups we've seen them have in like the AFC Championship. Obviously, New England's a much different looking team since then, but I think just because that is sort of almost like the passing of the guard. If New England's dynasty is really over, I mean, they're kind of handing it off to Kansas City, who have the potential to win multiple Super Bowls with Patrick Mahomes, considering how young he is and how good Kansas City is overall. So I think that matchup's interesting just because, it's almost like a passing of the guard and let's face it. I mean, New England could still be a good team next year. I mean, I'm not going to completely write them off. I mean, it's still a Bill Belichick team. So, and I think that's an interesting matchup as well. Andy Reid versus Bill Belichick, 2 great NFL coaches, long-term coaches, and, great, some of the all-time greats. And I think, it goes into so much more than just, potentially seeing Mahomes versus Jarrett Stidham or something like that. I think, there's still talent on both sides. And like I said, there's that whole passing of the guard sort of storyline going with it.
All right, and I apologize, guys. I'm going to leave my camera off for a little bit. My nose has a mind of its own today. So I'm going to, as long as you guys can still see the schedule, I'm not gonna keep my camera on. Y'all can still see, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. All right, so let's move on to Sunday Night Football then for Week 7. Philadelphia heads to Green Bay. This was an important game last year on the schedule when Philly went to Green Bay for a Thursday night game, and Philly came out on top. This was a big win for them in terms of their confidence. And this year, Chris, we get it on Sunday Night Football. What are your thoughts?
I think this is going to be another. I like this matchup. I like the quarterback matchups. I like the teams. The team matchup's really good. Like these are both good defenses now. I mean, they're both good defenses now. They both have good quarterbacks. So we have one quarterback going toward the end of his career, and then you have Carson Wentz getting into his prime. I mean, Wentz, Rodgers, that's a really good matchup, and I think it's definitely worthy of Sunday Night Football. And I think this could also play a factor in maybe a potential in playoff seedings this year too, because both teams have aspirations for playoffs.
Yep, and it's the John Whitley, Jarrett Kaufman Bowl. I'm sure they will try to find a way to watch this game together if social distancing allows us to. Then we go to Monday Night Football. Tennessee heads to Minnesota to face the Vikings. An important matchup. Two teams that made it all the way to the divisional round or better last year in Tennessee's case. But this is a very competitive game for a Monday night game. And a game we usually don't see that often, considering Minnesota and Tennessee are in opposite conferences. So I believe the last time Tennessee played Minnesota, it was 2012. Or 2012 in Minnesota, and then 2016 when Minnesota went to Tennessee. I believe in that game, I remember vaguely it was Sean Hill starting for the Vikings. The Vikings look very different today. They won this game. But that was in Tennessee. This time it is in Minnesota. And Tennessee-Minnesota for Monday Night Football Week 7. This is a game that I am looking forward to. I think this is a big game in terms of both teams' divisions. The fact that the NFC North plays the AFC South this year is really exciting because there's a lot of competition in each division. Should make for a very exciting game for Week 7 Monday Night Football. Then we go to Week 8. We're getting towards the halfway point in the year, but in Week 8, the Chargers in Miami, you probably could have guessed it. I'm continuing this trend of putting teams on Thursday Night Football that had the byes the week before, and they were the only two teams with a bye. So Miami getting a Week 8 game against the Chargers. Robert, where do you like this matchup for Miami?
I'd like to say it would be Tua versus Herbert, but it's probably not going to be. But no, I think it's a decent matchup for both sides. Obviously, the Chargers have a pretty good team, even though they missed the playoffs last year. Good defense. Should have Justin Herbert surrounded with a good offense as well. Miami is kind of just a question mark right now. I don't know how much better than a 5-win team they're going to be. Are they going to, with the defense and the amount of money they put into that, and obviously the draft they had, how much are they really going to improve? Is it going to be 7 wins? Is it going to be 8 wins? Are we talking playoffs? It's so up in the air still. But no, I like the matchup just because, these are two teams that should be on the rise. They sort of have it figured out at quarterback now. Obviously, there's a lot of questions with Herbert, and obviously Tua's not going to be starting. So, they're kind of in the same spot though. They picked one after the other in the draft, and they're looking to really start stepping their futures up, and they kind of need it. So it's an interesting matchup just from that perspective, just from that draft perspective.
Yeah. And our buys this week: Chicago, Denver, Green Bay, and let me see if I get this right. Kansas City. There are your buys for Week 8. Then we go to Then we go to the Sunday games, the Sunday early games. Indy at Tennessee, Cincinnati at Pittsburgh, Cleveland at the Giants, Baltimore at Washington, Las Vegas at the New York Jets, Detroit at Jacksonville, Carolina at New Orleans, Seattle heading to Buffalo, and Atlanta at Minnesota. This is 9 games for this early stretch here. Chris, what matchup excites you the most?
Well, obviously, I like my Seahawks, but actually, I do like the matchup the best. Even if I was not a Seahawks fan, I would still like this one the best out of all because it has slugfest written all over it. It has just running the football, just a very low scoring game written all over it. It has an old fashioned NFL game.
Yeah. And, that probably would be the game that I think gets the number one broadcast team, or at least for Fox. And then for CBS, you probably look at Indy, Tennessee is that game. I mean, but also we get to this point in the season and team, the totem pole has been set. So teams know where they stand. For all we know, Vegas and New York could be 7-0, 6-0 for the Jets' sake, but they could both be undefeated going into this game, and that could be the number one game. And at this point in the season, we can see flex scheduling, but at this point, we're not going to think about flex scheduling. We're just going to move with what we have so far. So this is the early set of games, and it's the first day of November. So this is after Halloween. A good Halloween hangover here on the opening games. But we have the late games here. Just 2 games on the schedule, but 2 very exciting games with Philly, Arizona, in San Francisco, Dallas. San Francisco, Dallas being the Troy Aikman, Joe Buck game is what I would call it. But there we go. There you have it for the opening games. Maybe you move one of these. So, like, if you had to move one of these games, Robert, into the late stretch, what would it be?
Indianapolis, Tennessee, just because of the individual rivalry and how much pressure is on both teams because they're going to both be gunning for first in that division. So, I mean, that's the matchup I would put later on, just be the ramifications of a matchup like that.
Right. Then we move on to Sunday Night Football. The LA Rams, Robert Husby, they go to Tampa to face the Bucks. If we have fans at this point, and it's November, so it is a decent amount away. It's about 6 months away. Would you book it down to Tampa to go and see this game?
Absolutely. If I got LA and Tampa just to see, I've always wanted to see Tom Brady in person, so that would be the closest drive for me, obviously. And then, I've never seen the Rams since they came back to LA. I left LA about 3 months after the Rams came back home, and I never got a chance to see them. So, I think that's a great matchup. It's going to be interesting to see where these two teams are at that point. Obviously it's Goff versus Brady. That's a cool, interesting matchup as well. So there's a lot riding on that game, and I would absolutely love to see that late matchup on a Sunday night.
Yeah. Then we have the Monday night game. It is the New England Patriots against my Houston Texans. This game is on a Monday night. I don't know if this will be a primetime game when it's all said and done, but when I looked at all these games for this week, there aren't a whole lot of showstoppers on the slate. So New England Houston, I guess, gets in by default, but it still is a good contest. Houston and New England obviously have a lot of ties with Bill O'Brien originally being a New England guy. There a lot of Bill O'Brien's staff came with him from New England, so it's a very there's a rivalry there, and Houston feels like New England always has their number. So this is a rivalry, at least in Houston's spot. New England probably really doesn't care that much, but for Houston it is, and the fact that New England is no longer as perceived as dominant as they once were should be an interesting game here. So. Ironically, there was a game, I believe it was the last time I think that New England played Houston, or at least the last time they played in Foxborough. But Brandon Cooks had the game-winning touchdown, and that was against that was while he was with the Patriots against Texans. So now Brandon Cooks, a member of the Texans, maybe we'll see a reversal of fortunes here. But now we go to Week 9, and Green Bay and Chicago, 2 teams with a bye the previous week. They get this game here. It was the opening game in 2019, and it came out 10-3. But now we have it later in the season on Thursday night. Chris, what would you expect from this matchup?
I actually think this is gonna be a better match than everyone thinks, because I actually think the Bears will be a little bit better than they were last year. And because I think last year was a little bit of a down year, because obviously the defense, you're not gonna score as many touchdowns as they did 2 years ago. Like on defense, you're not gonna have that great of a defense every year. That's like once in a while, like defense. But I think the defense will get better next year. I don't know who will be quarterback though. At Week 9, it could be Nick Foles. I mean, but by this time it will be set in stone who's quarterback. I truly believe it's going to be Nick Foles, not Mitchell Trubisky. I think Nick Foles just gives a better chance to win, and that's why I think this matchup will be pretty intriguing especially against a good Green Bay team.
Yeah. So now we get to the buys for the week. I'm just double checking on my phone where I have the schedule also pulled up just to make sure I'm getting this right. So, but I believe that I'm reading the master schedule properly. Here are the teams with Week 9. Detroit, Jacksonville, and the LA Rams and Tennessee. Those are the teams. Not threes, just two. Tennessee with the bye week 9. So then we get to the early games. Houston at Cleveland, Jets at Colts, Pittsburgh at the Giants, Baltimore at Cincinnati, Denver at Carolina, New Orleans at Atlanta, Minnesota at Tampa Bay, and Seattle at Washington. So there you have it with that. Minnesota, Tampa Bay, probably the headliner here. They probably get the number 1 broadcast team. So there you have it for the early games. And then we get to the late games here. Miami, Arizona, Buffalo, San Francisco. I'm really excited about that Buffalo-San Francisco game. And Philly, Dallas, obviously, here is the headliner. I believe they played on Sunday Night Football a lot this year, but they don't get that same opportunity again this year. But there you have it for the week 9 late games. But we get to the primetime games here. And the Sunday night game, New England at the Chargers. Again, not the most exciting matchup. Maybe you do throw in Philly and Dallas. Maybe that was the mistake I made here. But then you wouldn't have maybe a headlining game for the late games. Maybe you can argue for Buffalo, San Francisco. We'll see. But New England, LA, they get a Sunday night game this year. And then your Monday night game, Las Vegas at Kansas City. Another divisional matchup rivalry here for your week 9 Monday Night Football game to close out the 9th week of the NFL season. Now we get to week 10, and in week 10 we have the tradition. I feel like if there isn't a game that screams Thursday Night Football, this is it. Jacksonville, Tennessee. I feel like this is a Thursday night game every season. Am I wrong, Chris Wolf?
You're not wrong. It's always a mid-season game. It's always a mid-season game. It seems like too.
Yeah, Robert. What are you going to watch Jacksonville, Tennessee in week 10 of the NFL season?
No, hockey will probably be on, and so will basketball. So I'll have something else to watch depending on there. No offense to Jacksonville and Tennessee, but that's kind of not hyped about that.
Yeah. So our buys this week, we have Atlanta, Arizona. Let me make sure I'm reading this right. We have Cincinnati. We have New Orleans. And we have New England. Let me just do it alphabetical order. New England, New Orleans, and Tampa Bay. So a six bye week for week 10 here. And then you have your early games here. This was actually one of the toughest weeks I had to schedule because there were so many games worthy of prime time. And obviously it kicks off here with Kansas City, Baltimore. I eventually, I'll show you, you'll understand why this was the early game that I had to schedule in. And it gets Jim Nantz and Tony Romo, but it's the 1:00 game for this week, and it's a headliner for the following games. Cleveland at the Jets, Denver at Pittsburgh, Buffalo at Miami, Houston at Indianapolis, LA Rams against Philly, Washington at Detroit, and Chicago at Carolina. So then the late games, there's some more fireworks here, guys. So the Chargers at the Vikings and Minnesota at Seattle. I really wanted Minnesota-Seattle to be a primetime game. I could have thrown Kansas City, Baltimore here, but ultimately Minnesota and Seattle gets the game. Chris, I've respected your Seattle Seahawks here, and I feel like they always play Minnesota on primetime or a national TV slot every year.
Yeah, I do see that. And I also have one question. When are they going to schedule Seattle to go to Minnesota? It seems like every time Minnesota and Seattle play in Seattle, it's like four straight times or at least. I mean, man. I know I like Seattle at home, but that seems a little bit unfair. But
I think that this is the game because Seattle doesn't have to play. This is a game because this is a game in the schedule because Minnesota and Seattle both finished second place in their division this year. So that's what this game is for. But it just so happens to be, and I think that Seattle just happens to be the one that gets the home game every year. But I believe next year, or next year or the year after that, is when the NFC North will play the NFC West again. They played, they played each other last year, right? The NFC North and the NFC West. Was that last year?
It might have been 2 years. It might have been 2 years ago.
Yeah. So next year will probably be the year where Seattle finally goes to Minnesota.
Okay. Yeah. Finally made their appearance in their stadium.
Yeah. And then we get the Sunday night game here, Green Bay at San Francisco, a rematch of the NFC Championship from a year ago, a return to the scene of the crime for the Green Bay Packers. So that's this game obviously had to be on national TV in some way, shape, or form for this week. And ultimately, I've slotted them in on Sunday night. It's a game that, Green Bay and San Francisco both have national fan bases. Put them on prime time where they belong. And then we get to the Monday night game this week, Dallas at the Giants. So part of this also, with Kansas City, Baltimore is, I believe, this also reflects next week's schedule and is part of the reason why I couldn't slot them on prime time both weeks. But Kansas City, Baltimore, I figure unless they enter an impossible situation like the one that I encountered, that will be certainly a Sunday night game or a late game on a weekend, or a late game on Sunday, things like that. So that's where I'm at. But Dallas, New York is a Monday night game this year in week 10. And then we get to week 11. This is the last week, I believe, for buys. But Arizona, New England, two teams that had a bye the previous week, they get the Thursday night game here. What do you all think of Arizona, New England? Robert, what do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. You obviously have a really good offense in Arizona, at least on paper for now, and a really good defense. Obviously that's, like I said, that's all on paper. We don't know until we actually get into the season. And a New England team that, does have a defense to match up against a great offense like that. So, obviously New England will be at home in this schedule, and I think that's a nice matchup. It's a chance for Kyler Murray to go up against one of those veteran teams, and a chance for him to prove himself on the road.
Mm-hmm. And your buys this week are Las Vegas, the New York Giants, you get San Francisco, and Washington. And this is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the last week for buys. Every team plays in week 12 and beyond. So there you have it for the buys. That's the last time I'll have to type in anything, hopefully, for this schedule. But now we move on to the early games. For week 11, Indianapolis heads to Cleveland to face the Browns. Tennessee heads to Houston to face the Texans. Kansas City heads to Buffalo to face the Bills. Miami heads to Jacksonville. Miami heads to Jacksonville in a Florida only matchup against the Jags. Cincinnati at Philadelphia. Detroit at Minnesota. New Orleans against Chicago. And Carolina against Green Bay. So then we move on to the late games here. The Jets head to the Chargers in LA. Tampa heads to Denver. And your game of the week, Baltimore at Pittsburgh. I wanted to put Baltimore and Pittsburgh on a national scale because this rivalry needs to come back. I feel like this is a rivalry that reminds me of my childhood. I feel like Baltimore and Pittsburgh was two games every year that you had to watch. And this year, I think, could be the opportunity for that to be reignited. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, that is the late game on Sunday for week 11. And then your Sunday night game, Atlanta at Dallas. This is, I believe, Atlanta's only game that is a primetime game other than their Thursday night game. So I felt like I deserved to give Atlanta a little bit of love. They won't be getting a whole lot of it, I think, when it comes to the schedule, but they get it here. They go to Dallas for Sunday Night Football in week 11. And then you get your Monday night game. It is the battle of Robert and Chris. It is Seattle at the Rams, Monday, November 23rd. This is the week. This is the game before Thanksgiving. So, what do you guys think of Seattle, LA, week 11, this late in the season? Chris?
I think I've always liked these matchups late in the season. I mean, we had a late game season, a late one last year in LA in a Sunday night game, a game where the Rams handled Seattle pretty easily. And I mean, I think this is gonna be a tough game. I mean, even though the Rams may not be the best team in the division, they're still a tough out. I mean, they still have a Sean McVay offense. They still have talent on the defense. Last time I checked, Aaron Donald still is on the defensive line and always seems to give Russell Wilson some trouble in just about every game they play. So this should be a pretty exciting game. And it could be a battle for a wild card spot for like a team like the Rams or Seattle.
Yeah, Robert, what are your thoughts?
No, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the thing with a game like this so late in the season is it can really, really have playoff implications. Whether or not the Rams are even in a playoff spot, if the Rams aren't, I mean, Seattle probably will be. So you can again play spoiler to Seattle, or they could be both gunning for the division. I mean, this division is, I think, in my opinion, it's going to be the toughest division in football next year because it's so tightly packed with talent. I mean, San Francisco really didn't lose a huge amount of players. I mean, they lost to Forrest Buckner, but I don't think they're going to be that worse off. Seattle is just as good. The Rams can go either way, and Arizona should be way better on paper. So at least on paper. So I mean, that division it's up in the air, and I think having a late matchup like this is just screams this is going to have an effect on some team for the playoffs, whether it's directly on Seattle, directly on the Rams, or even in the division leader if the division leader happens to be the 49ers. I mean, there's a lot of implications here with a matchup like this, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, and now we get to the very heavily anticipated Thanksgiving games, and here we go. So Green Bay heads to Detroit in the Detroit game. That's on CBS, and then Pittsburgh heads to Dallas in the Dallas game. And this is more just to get as many eyeballs on the screen. I feel like Pittsburgh has a boatload of fans that will be super excited to see their team playing on Thanksgiving. Green Bay as well against a rival, and then of course the third game of the Thanksgiving day, New Orleans at Tampa. This is Brady Breeze Part 2, a sequel from their Week 5 Sunday night game. They get it again on Thanksgiving Day. Robert, could you ask for any more on Thanksgiving?
No, that's dessert right there. New Orleans and Tampa Bay. I mean, obviously Detroit and Dallas is the two games. They always get a game on Thanksgiving. It's tradition. It's a tale as old as time. But New Orleans, Tampa Bay, a division rivalry. These teams are battling it out for supremacy in that division now. You couldn't ask for anything better after filling up on food all day. That's just a great way to end the night.
Yeah. And Chris, you have a lot of star power on this day. You have Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, all playing on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, this could be. I mean, if this really. I mean, if this ends up being it, this should be one of the best Thanksgiving days. I mean, just to end Thanksgiving Day with Brady Breeze ending Thanksgiving. I mean, that could potentially become one of the most watched Thanksgiving games in NFL history.
Yeah, originally my goal was to get Seattle and San Francisco on here, but ultimately it was not in the cards because I believe San Francisco had the bye the week before and Seattle didn't, and I didn't want to hurt Seattle's chances by throwing them on a short week when San Francisco had the bye the week before and no short week. So that was the logic behind that. Like originally when I was thinking, the Thanksgiving games were one of the first things that I slotted in. And originally I was thinking, Seattle, San Francisco, that'd be a great way to end Thanksgiving. And I honestly, if it isn't New Orleans, Tampa, I would expect Seattle, San Francisco to be a strong candidate for that late game. And even San Francisco, Dallas could be the Dallas game. I just figured with Pittsburgh, they only go to Dallas once every 8 years. This is, the time. I feel like there's no better time than now for this to really take place. So That's why Green Bay, Detroit is here. That's why Pittsburgh, Dallas is here. New Orleans, Tampa, it's the pumpkin pie of the day. So then we get to the Sunday games, the Thanksgiving hangover. We have Indianapolis at Las Vegas. That should actually be a late game. Excuse me. Let me change that right now. That is a 4:05 start. Miami and New England at 1:00. Tennessee and Jacksonville. Buffalo and New York. Cleveland and Cincinnati. Philadelphia at Washington. And LA at the Rams. Oh my goodness, this is also a 4:00 game. Excuse me. My apologies, everyone. And then Houston and Chicago. So adding the Rams and Cardinals and Indy, Las Vegas to these late games here. We also have Atlanta at LA, New York at Baltimore, and here you have it, Chris. Seattle at San Francisco in their first game since the infamous, Week 17 Sunday night game just a year ago. What are your thoughts on Seattle, San Francisco?
I think these games are going to be just physically draining because both teams like to run the football a lot, to the top 5 in rushing yards per game. Even though Seattle's defense maybe isn't as good as the Niners, it can still be physical because it still has talent on it. And the quarterbacks, like Russell Wilson, Jimmy Garoppolo. Russell Wilson is the best quarterback in that division. So maybe he doesn't have the best defense, but also he had the best quarterback. And both these games last year, last play of the game, it legitimately went to the last play of the game in both games. I mean, game-winning field goal at the end of overtime in the first meeting in San Francisco last year, and then obviously the infamous Week 17 inch short of the division title for Seattle in that game. So
there was really no series between two divisional opponents that was more exciting than Seattle San Francisco last year, and that's why I wanted them to be a Thanksgiving game. Ultimately, it just didn't work out that way. But here we go. The next best thing, putting them, on Thanksgiving weekend here with the late game on the Sunday. But then we get to Sunday Night Football. Denver at Kansas City, another rivalry game, and it gets Kansas City on the national spotlight once again. And then you have the Monday night game, Carolina at Minnesota. It's Carolina's only national televised game outside of their Thursday night game, so had to throw Carolina on there. Christian McCaffrey, obviously one of the best players in the NFL. He gets to go against the Minnesota Vikings to end the month of November. Then we go to December. This is when games start becoming a lot more important. And it starts here in Week 13 with San Francisco at the Rams. Ultimately, the reason why San Francisco-Seattle wasn't a Sunday night game or a Monday night game is because San Francisco needed a Thursday night game the following week against the Rams. This is the first game in December, Robert, and this is when games start getting super important. So how do you feel about this being the first game in the month of December, especially for your LA Rams?
It's been a hellish 3 weeks right there on the schedule.
Yeah.
I believe it was Seattle, then Arizona, now San Francisco. That's all
Gotta
three
get those divisional games in.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's a hellish week for the Rams. But no, I mean, that's what you have to do if you want to get in the playoffs. You have to prove you're better than the rest of your division. And if the Rams have any shot to make the playoffs next year, if they really think they can compete, they're going to have to beat those division rivals. So, I mean, this is going to be either the toughest matchup since Seattle, or this will be the toughest matchup overall that they've faced. And San Francisco is a huge, huge team. I mean, this is big time. So, for a Thursday night football game, it's great. But it's going to be very, very tough for the Rams to go against, one of those elite teams like San Francisco if they have any chance in that division.
Yeah, so LA and San Francisco, this is their first meeting of the season. So what better way than right at the beginning of December to really put a lot more pressure on them for the NFC West race. Then you get the early games, a big week of early games here. Denver at New England, Las Vegas at Atlanta, LA Chargers heading to Cincinnati to face the Bengals, Buffalo heading to Tennessee to face the Titans. That could be an important game as well. The Jets heading to Kansas City to face the Chiefs, Philly heading to Cleveland to face the Browns, Detroit heading to Carolina to face the Panthers, Washington heading to New York to face the Giants, Arizona heading to Dallas to face the Cowboys, and Tampa heading to Chicago to face the Bears. Then we go to the late games here. Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Seattle at Miami, two games that no games on the West Coast this week for any teams, but Minnesota, Houston is the late game here. Two teams that went to the divisional round a year ago. There weren't zero games on the West Coast that were on Sunday in the early round. So we settle with Minnesota, Houston. We give two East Coast teams. We give two East Coast teams a game. But hey, Seattle, Miami, another Robert Husby and Chris Wolf Bowl. And it also happens, December is when, the sun sets a lot earlier. It sets around halftime. I love those type of games where you get daylight, like sunset, like in the first half, and then in the second half it's night. And that's what we're going to get here with Seattle, Miami. And even Minnesota, Houston, although Houston's stadium is closed and so is Indianapolis's. But that's what you get for your late games for Week 13. But then Sunday Night Football. I'm going to let y'all look at that for a second. This is Rodgers Breeze. Green Bay, New Orleans, Week 13. What are y'all's thoughts? Chris, what do you think? Green Bay, New Orleans, Sunday Night Football here.
This game is going to be really good. I mean, we don't get to see Rodgers Breeze often. I have not seen that matchup that often, and we finally get to see that this year. I think it's going to be it just has really good game written all over it. I mean, two aging superstar quarterbacks, though Breeze is a few years older than Rodgers. Still, they're both back half of their primes, and this may be the last time we see this matchup. I mean, potentially.
Yeah, it could be because with Breeze on a 1-year deal. Not really. I mean, he has the option for 2021, but he has the deal with NBC. This is actually not an NFL network; it's on NBC. It's Sunday Night Football. But yeah, it could be Breeze's last Sunday night game before he goes into the booth. But there you have it for Week 13 Sunday Night Football. But then you get the Monday night game again, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Monday Night Football in December, divisional football. This is going to be fun. I cannot wait to see this game if it took place. But yeah, December 7th, Pittsburgh at Baltimore. That is what's going to go down. And then we get to Week 14. New England Patriots, New York Jets, two teams. Obviously, the Jets did have that early Thursday night game against the Seattle Seahawks to get another Thursday night game here. However, the reason why I felt that I could put multiple teams on Thursday night is because you did have that rule where you had where the Jets didn't really have that short week when they had their first Thursday night game. So that was the rule here. If I give any team multiple Thursday night games, it was teams that had the bye week before that then went into the Thursday game. And the Patriots-Jets, a good rivalry to start for Week 14. And then you get to the early games here. Of course, another error again. Excuse me, guys. But Denver, LA Chargers, that's a late game. Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Cleveland, Tennessee, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Jacksonville Jaguars at Minnesota Vikings, Giants at Eagles, Carolina at Tampa Bay, Atlanta at Green Bay, Chicago at Detroit, and Dallas at Washington. A lot of divisional games there in a 9-game slate for that. And Denver, LA joins this crew of games for there you go. And whoa, that was kind of great. There you go. Your games here. Another Robert Husby, Chris Wolf Bowl with the Rams Seahawks in Week 14. Joining Arizona and San Francisco in another NFC West showdown. And then, of course, Miami heading to Vegas. So a lot of divisional games here in Week 14. And the Rams in Seattle are no different. This is I believe, this is their second meeting of the season. But how important are these divisional matchups in December?
I think they're incredibly important, especially in this division. where a single game could be the difference between you making a wild card or winning the division or even being out of the playoffs because of just how stacked this division. Like third place, like I legit think third place in this division could win 10 games. Like third place could win 10 games.
Yeah.
With potential.
Which that could get you in the playoffs this year, especially with the third wild card. I figure that no matter what, we've had some, weird circumstances in the past where teams have won 10 games and they haven't made the playoffs. I remember even there was one year where the Patriots, they won. It was the year they had Matt Castle instead of Tom Brady. They won 11 games and didn't make the playoffs. But I don't think you're going to see that with three wild cards here. But hey, when you're playing your division though, these games, it's very possible to win or to lose at any point. And Rams Seahawks could be a game that could alter the standings in the NFC West, in the NFC seeding wise. It's a very important game on December 13th for the NFC West and for Week 14 in the NFL schedule. Then we move to Sunday Night Football. Baltimore-Houston, another game that could affect the AFC schedule. A big game. It's Lamar against Deshaun, two of the league's best quarterbacks on the biggest stage on Sunday Night Football. So definitely something that you need there. Baltimore's played Houston a lot on prime time. I believe it was 2 years ago they had a primetime game in Baltimore. Or it seems like when Baltimore and Houston play, the chances of them on prime time are a little bit higher than a normal game. So Baltimore-Houston Sunday Night Football, Week 14, and then the Monday night game, there you have it. It's Kansas City at New Orleans. Mahomes versus Breeze. This is it. Week 14, December 14th. Mahomes versus Breeze. Robert, Husby, what are your thoughts on this game?
Beautiful. That's just, a great matchup. Again, you have a veteran quarterback like Breeze versus the young prodigy, the young Super Bowl winner now in Patrick Mahomes. Two great offensive teams. New Orleans is, haven't been able to get over the hump in the playoffs yet, but, they're such a stellar team overall, especially their offense. And Kansas City, the same thing. And it's really just a battle of, you could see this as a great matchup for years to come, even when Breeze retires. You're looking at two great teams, and I think it's just going to be an offensive, just a shootout. I think you're going to, even though they both have good defenses, I think, their offenses are just so good that, you're going to see a pretty high scoring game. And I think this will be one of the most exciting games of the season. And it's great that it'll be a Monday night. It would be a Monday night game. I think that's where you put a game like this.
Yeah, but Chris, with only one team getting a bye this year, having games like this that are intra-conference that, could go either way. I feel like Kansas City, New Orleans could go either way. But having just one bye, how much does that heighten the pressure for a game like this?
I think it tightens it a lot because at this point in the season, at Week 14, this potentially could be the two first place teams in each conference. So this could make the game like all that more important. And I know people don't love the new system with the one bye and the three wild card. I kind of like it because it makes games like these. It makes you not want to rest people. You're gonna see fewer rest weeks for people that think, oh, we already have our bye locked up or something, or we have a bye locked up, or number one seed locked up. Like these games are going to mean stuff even in week 17.
Mm-hmm.
Now.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted it this late in the season. I think that it's going to make this game, which would be exciting in any of the 17 weeks, just that more exciting. So that's why that sits here at the end of week 14. But then we get to week 15, the last Thursday night football game of the season. We get Carolina at Atlanta, divisional matchup, two teams that have not had a Thursday night game yet. They get one here at week 15. Then we go to the early games here, the Chargers at the Chiefs, the Houston Texans at Jacksonville, Las Vegas heading to Cleveland to face the Browns, Buffalo at Denver. That should be a late game too. My goodness, I am a mess today. But the Jets at the Patriots, the Cincinnati Bengals at Miami, Tampa at New York, and Chicago at Green Bay, and Minnesota at Detroit. There you have it for the Week 15 games. But now joining Buffalo, Denver in the late games here, Washington, Arizona, Dallas, LA, Tennessee, Baltimore. That could be the primetime game, but ultimately it is New Orleans, Philly here. So two very important games here. Tennessee, Baltimore, obviously, that is where Baltimore season ended last year, and they get it this year, super close to the postseason in Week 15. How could a game like this, Chris, affect how a team goes into the playoffs?
I think games like this affect teams going into the playoffs because, a team like Tennessee, like a team like Baltimore, I think that could be those are trap type games, in my opinion. I think this is the time of year where you can get maybe some trap games. Mm-hmm. Like, you should win a game. Like, Baltimore's at home against Tennessee. They should win that game. But then you see, it's last year in the playoffs, Tennessee win to Baltimore and then just out-muscled them. So you could see a similar thing like that because Kansas City is going to be fighting with Baltimore for the number one seed all season. So this could be a game where this could be where experience comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll mention this. So the New England-New York game, obviously I did realize that they played just the week before in Week 14. But this was, and usually I tried to avoid this, but this was just the one instance in which I simply could not avoid it. I tried a bunch of different scenarios to try to fix it, but ultimately this is how the schedule wound up. So my apologies for that. Usually I don't think we're going to see two teams play back-to-back weeks on a schedule, especially for a divisional game. But that's where we're at. So again, important games here. Dallas, LA. That could be a game that could be seen on a primetime matchup. Tennessee, Baltimore again is another primetime matchup. New Orleans, Philly ultimately gets the late game slot here. But then you get Sunday Night Football. Indianapolis at Pittsburgh. I really wanted this game to be on a primetime game as well. I remember they played last year, and it was a very exciting game. They didn't. It wasn't a primetime game, but it definitely brought the drama. And so that's why it's here late in December. Ideally, this could be two teams that are fighting for a wild card spot that have to go against each other this late in the year. One team has to lose. Pittsburgh, I believe, was in this spot in Sunday Night Football last year against Buffalo. They were flexed into it. And what we could see here is we could see like Tennessee, Baltimore, or like New Orleans, Philly, maybe even Dallas, LA, flexed into this Sunday Night Football spot. Like Pittsburgh was last year when they had to play Buffalo, and that was a big game in terms of the wild card spot, and ultimately Buffalo won this game and clinched the wild card spot. But two teams like the Colts and Steelers, those teams fighting for a playoff spot, they deserve to be here on prime time. It's an important game for the AFC playoff race, wherever it's slotted in the schedule, but especially now here with just 3 games to go in the regular season. And then, of course, Monday night, I had to put them on Monday night at least once. But San Francisco, Seattle, they pop in Week 15 here, Monday Night Football. Let's move on to Week 16 now. This is your Saturday games because college football season is come and gone, so the NFL can play games on Saturday. They do so here with 3 games here. Arizona, Carolina is the first game, a game that probably won't mean too much with the playoff race. But then you have the Vegas Raiders against the Chargers. 4:30 game, again, another game that probably doesn't mean a whole lot for the playoff race, but it is a divisional game. And then you have Dallas and Minnesota, which actually could be huge for the NFL wildcard race. So that game is the late game on the triple header for the Saturday, December 26th, Boxing Day. And then you get the Sunday early games, Houston at Pittsburgh, a big game. You have Indianapolis, Jacksonville, a big divisional game. New England Buffalo, another divisional. A lot of divisional games here with Miami and New York as well. Washington at Cleveland, New York Giants at Cincinnati, Seattle at Atlanta, and Detroit at Tennessee. That should be a 1:00 game. But yes, so there you have it. And then you get the late games here: Chicago at the Rams, KC at Denver, and then of course, probably the best game from last year in the regular season. Excuse me, San Francisco, New Orleans, and again, Week 16, guys. There's only 2 games left in the year, and with only one bye in each conference, this could be the game that determines who gets that bye. Robert, what do you see in this matchup?
It shows New Orleans has a chance 2 weeks in a row to ruin a conference clinch. So if they play Kansas City the week before, or the week before that, I forget if it was week 14 or 15 that you had New Orleans and Kansas City. But New Orleans and Kansas City, New Orleans wins. What happens if Baltimore is right there with Kansas City and New Orleans wins? Baltimore clinches the AFC. San Francisco plays New Orleans. What happens if San Francisco is right there up with, let's say Seattle or something like that, and New Orleans wins, beats San Francisco, and ruins the NFC for San Francisco. So, I see New Orleans, here playing against, 2 top teams in completely separate conferences. And I think New Orleans is a great matchup for any team. New Orleans is just like I said, just a fantastic team that just has not been able to get over the hump and get into the Super Bowl in the last few years. But no, I think New Orleans, San Francisco is a fantastic matchup, again, much like Kansas City and New Orleans. But, it's a little bit more defensively minded. It's probably not going to be as big of a shootout as Kansas City and New Orleans would be. San Francisco is a lot tighter on defense than Kansas City is. So, you're looking at different score lines potentially. But yeah, no, just another great matchup and another chance for New Orleans in this scenario to, sort of play spoiler to, the potential number 1 seeds in the conference.
Yeah. So this is New Orleans' schedule for December. Okay, this is what we know so far. They play Week 13 against Green Bay. All right, Week 13 against Green Bay. Week 14 against Kansas City. Week 15 against Philadelphia. And Week 16 against San Francisco. That's their December. Now, granted, 3 of those games are at home, but Chris, that is a brutal December schedule, and I did that on purpose. I needed New Orleans fans to really, earn it down the stretch. But do you think that it is an advantage or a disadvantage that you are playing the best? That you're playing basically 4 perennial playoff teams, that you are playing the best competition that you possibly can on your schedule later in the year or in the beginning of the year?
I actually am going to go with. I actually really think this is an advantage for the Saints because this will show if they're ready for the playoffs or not. Like that's 4 potential division winners that they're going to play in a row. That's 4 division win. Those 4 teams that they're playing. Those 4 teams won their respective divisions this last season. Mm-hmm. So that's I think in having a schedule like that, if you're able to win at least half of those or even like 3 of those, that will show that you are ready for the playoffs. It shows that you can beat all these good teams. You can beat the good teams in the league. Because beating them at the beginning of the season, I don't think matter. It matters, but it also it's like some teams take a little bit of time to get going. I mean, you've seen teams start 2-2, 3-3, but then end up being like a 12-win team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there you have it. And so the reason why this is not a primetime game, this is the reason why this is not a Sunday night game, is because this is the Sunday night game we have. That's the Sunday night game. And for those of you that are listening and not watching what I just scrolled onto the screen, it is the Green Bay Packers heading to Tampa Bay to face the Buccaneers in Rodgers versus Brady. So this is it. Week 16, guys. 2 teams that are planning on making deep playoff runs. This is it. Week 16, Green Bay at Tampa Bay. What do you guys think about having this game as the absolute latest place it can be in the season, given that Week 17 is only divisional games. Robert, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean it's big, Rodgers versus Brady is very it's the Whitley versus Sean debate right here, where we get to settle it right here.
Yep.
I think it's a great matchup. Two guys that obviously Rodgers is I think 35, 36, but Brady's obviously 42. Two guys that have been consistently praised as two of the top quarterbacks in the league. I don't even know when's the last time Rodgers and Brady played each other. It's been
a while.
It's been a while. So
yeah, they haven't been in the same conference, so they don't play each other as often.
No, definitely, and I think it's just such a marquee. Like, it's arguably the two best quarterbacks in football the last decade or so. So I mean, this is just a fantastic matchup. And if you're not watching because you're a Green Bay fan, you're not watching because you're a Tampa Bay fan, whatever. I think just on the quarterback matchup alone, you're watching this game because it's just a match made in heaven. It's two guys that are constantly in debates, constantly in arguments about, oh, well, Rodgers is better, oh, well, Brady's better. Well, now we get to see them face off against each other in a long time, and we get to see two great teams overall face each other. So absolutely, I'm very excited for this matchup if it happens.
I believe what I'm reading is the last time this happened was in 2018 when the Packers went to New England, and this was only the second time they had played. So this is Rodgers Brady Part 3, and I believe they're 1-1 against each other.
Oh, here's the tiebreaker then.
I believe, this is the tiebreaker. So yeah, it was a 31-17 win for the Patriots. And we always wanted these two to play in a Super Bowl. I guess we're not really going to see that if Green Bay and Tampa are they're still their teams. Maybe Rodgers leaves. Maybe Rodgers leaves the Packers at some point. Maybe Brady goes and leaves at some point. But this might be the last time we get Rodgers Brady. So we're going to enjoy it on December 27th, this late in the year. But then we get the Monday night game. A big game, maybe not the biggest game of the week, but Baltimore at Philly. Still a very important game. Philly, I think Philly benefited last year from having an easy schedule down the stretch in December. A lot of their weaker divisional opponents, but this year they don't get that. Excuse me. With Baltimore. So that's the last Monday night game of the season. As we head into Week 17, and Week 17, I only have just the matchups here. Don't really have the times, but here we go. Jets at Bills, New England at Miami, Washington at Dallas, Philly at New York, Cleveland at Baltimore, Pittsburgh at Cincinnati, Tennessee at Indianapolis, Jacksonville at Houston, Tampa at Carolina, Atlanta at New Orleans, Detroit at Chicago, and Minnesota at Green Bay. And then you have the late games: Kansas City, LA Chargers, Denver at Vegas, Rams at Niners, Arizona at Seattle. So obviously, these games are going to move around depending on where the playoff implications are. But what game do you guys think that we could see here on Sunday night? And I'll probably I'll move this back to 125 so you can see all the games. So what game do you think could be the Sunday night game here? If you had to just guess right now. Chris, we'll start with you.
I think it's going to be Minnesota Green Bay because I feel like that one has potential to be for a division title because I think that one has division title potential, like a winner take all.
Yeah, I mean that obviously is probably the game that stands out the most right now. But I mean, look, you never know what games could pop in as super playoff implications. Rams at Niners could also be that. But you never know because teams could squeak into the playoffs. Like, I don't think a lot of teams really thought that Buffalo was going to be a playoff team last year or Tennessee was going to be a playoff team last year, but they both snuck in. Last year it was pretty obvious with Seattle and San Francisco that was going to be after they played the first game. I think people were starting to Sharpie them in as the last game of the season. But this year, at least with this stretch of games, it's not as obvious, painstakingly obvious. But Robert, what would you say would be your pick for Sunday Night Football if this was the slate of games?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to be boring, and I'm gonna have to go in agreement with Chris. Minnesota Green Bay is probably the one that you're gonna get the most ratings on, just because it's a divisional championship matchup potentially. I'm hesitant to put the Jets up there with Buffalo. I don't know if the Jets are gonna be even close to getting a wild card spot. Tennessee, Indianapolis potentially is. I think Indianapolis is probably going for a wild card. I doubt Tennessee is really going to be competing with Indianapolis for number one in that division. I mean the only other one I could see is Rams, San Francisco, or Arizona, Seattle. I mean it really depends on which two teams you think are going to be competing for a divisional championship. I mean, if it was San Francisco, Seattle, that's probably your night game, but Rams, San Francisco, Arizona, Seattle. I don't know. It's going to be too close to call, I think. So I would go with Minnesota, Green Bay. That's your best chance at seeing a really, really big matchup that has huge implications on the playoffs on a Sunday night. So I would say Minnesota, Green Bay as well.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see where we're at. But before we go, I'm going to show you guys what I've been the master sheet that I've been working on to try to organize all of this stuff. It's hard to read, but just look at what I've been working with here. This is what I've been working with right here, and it's hard to explain. I tried explaining it to myself many times before, but basically, like for example, I guess we'll bring the Green Bay Tampa game up. So all of the games down are home, and all of the games across are away. So if you look here, Green Bay plays Tampa Bay on the road for week 16. So that's like an example of what I've been working with. This really helped me. This really guided me through this whole experience. I don't know if I'll ever do this again, but I'm glad that I did because it was just absolutely mad. But it definitely killed some time during quarantine. So I'm very grateful for it. But yeah, I'm curious to see what the actual schedule is going to look like. I'm definitely going to be watching the schedule reveal to find out where we are and what's going to happen with that. We'll probably analyze the schedule like this with the actual schedule soon. So be sure to check that out on the Hitting the Field podcast. And for more information, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to wherever you listen to podcasts. Our Hitting the Field podcast. We also have Hitting the Crew podcast coming out soon, probably in the next week or two. And we also have Take Me Out to the podcast. I know Johnny Jackson is working on getting a Korean baseball guide podcast in the next couple days or so. So be sure to check that out as well. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hitting the Field for everything you need to know about our show that we work on during the school year, but we also want to provide coverage for during the off season. So be sure to check that out as well. So again, Robert and Chris, thank you so much for reading the schedule with me. Did you guys enjoy it?
Yeah,
If the schedule, would you be happy?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good matchups, especially that New Orleans. What was it? Tampa New Orleans game on Thanksgiving. I think that's probably my favorite matchup.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the flip side.